Innovate Bio. This is through the Innovate Bio grant. So thank you so much. And it's trying to bring community together. So this is great. And I see Sandy's here and maybe Linnea will join in as well.
Great. Thank you, Ying Su. And Wendy.
I'm Wendy Johnston. I'm the lab director for Pasadena Bio Collaborative, and we do incubation and workforce training.
Thank you, Wendy. Chandra.
Hi, I'm Chandra Arora. I'm biotech faculty at LA Mission College, which is in Silmar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Jan.
Hi, I'm Jan Chalepny. I'm at Shoreline Community College Biotech Program, and we're just north of Seattle in Washington State.
Thank you, Jan. And Tom.
Tom Chen from Santa Monica College, and we are starting our biotech program. So we are kind of new kids on the block. Looking forward to learn everything today and the next few days.
And you're located?
Oh, I'm sorry, Santa Monica College, California.
Thank you, Tom. And Manny.
Yes, Manny Acosta. I teach at Los Angeles Trade Tech College and in downtown Los Angeles.
Thank you, Manny. Adam.
I'm Adam Talene. I'm run the biotech program at American River College in Sacramento, California.
Thanks, Adam. Emily Quach.
Hello, my name is Emily Kwok, and I teach at Laney College and Skyline College, both located in the Bay Area. And I'm happy to be part of the biomanufacturing program.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Anjali.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am based at Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria, California. And we are also looking into starting a plant and ag biotech program.
Thanks, Anjali. Kitty.
Hello, my name is Kitty, and I work with Yingsu at Baybeck.
Thanks, Kitty. And Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Smith, and I teach microbiology at the College of San Mateo.
And where's that located?
Sorry, that's located on the peninsula just south of San Francisco.
Thanks, Chris. Joe.
Hi, I'm Jo Wu from Fullerton College, which is in Orange County, California.
Thanks, Joe. Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Blakey. I'm the founder of the biomanufacturing program at Laney College. Emily is a former student of mine, so it's really exciting to have her be a teacher. And Laney is located in downtown Oakland.
Thanks, Leslie. Nick.
Hi, my name is Nick Cap. I'm lagging a little bit, so I don't know what's going on here. Anyways, I am at Skyline College, and we are just south of San Francisco on a peninsula. I'm a little bit further north than Christopher is.
Thanks, Nick. Kathy.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kathy Harker. I teach at Citrus College in Glendora, which is in right outside of Los Angeles.
Thanks, Kathy. Aaron.
Hi all, I'm Aaron Kamajaya. I'm a faculty at Los Angeles Pierce College in Los Angeles.
Thanks, Aaron. Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam Eversole. I'm the director of the biotechnology program at Pasadena City College in Pasadena, California.
Thanks, Pam. Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy Porter with Innovate Bio and Digital World Biology. And before I forget, I want to encourage all of you, if you haven't joined Digital World Bio or Innovate Bio, to join as a college program and as an individual. And I'm here because I couldn't miss hearing the chance to hear Vivian, who's a rock star.
Thanks, Sandy. Carla.
Hey everyone, my name is Carla Montanek. I'm with Portland Community College in Oregon, and I'm adjunct faculty and the lab manager for the program.
Great, thank you, Carla. And Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Stever. I'm faculty at Cerritos College, and that's in LA County, California.
Thank you, Michelle. Rachel.
Hi, Rachel Harper DeLupio, faculty at Los Angeles Trade Technical College with Manny in downtown LA in chemistry and chem tech.
Thanks, Rachel. And Aram.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Miriam Syed, microbiology faculty at the Los Angeles Southwest College, and I'm based in the greater Los Angeles area, California.
Thank you, Aram. And Lakshmi.
I'm Lakshmi Reddy. I'm at the East Los Angeles College in Monterey Park. And I'm so pleased there are half a dozen of us from our district.
Great. Thank you, Lakshmi. So thank you, everyone. And what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Ying Su, and she has a few announcements, and we'll introduce Vivian.
Yes, thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you here. And, you know, we have so many community meetings with Terry, but it's good to also see folks from Portland, Oregon, and Shoreline Community College from Washington. It's nice to get our West Coaster people together. Just a couple of announcements. Hopefully you got this memory jogger book. I'll have it handy. Vivian will go not in depth into it, but she'll take you through some parts of it. There's also documents that you may send to me if you want. After today, especially, you'll find out, hey, we're really going to dive deep into those documents and get you ready for fall. It's, you know, I'm still going to leave that open for you to send to us. And then stipend, I don't know how much yet. I have to redo some calculations, but at the end of this 3-day workshop, you will get a stipend. Okay, and also make sure you fill in your intro slides. It's so nice to see everybody's faces and what you do and where you're from. So make sure you fill that in. I put that in the chat some time ago. So, okay, so now I'm gonna introduce Vivian. And Vivian, I don't know how you say your middle part, Ngan Winward. Is that right?
Good enough.
Okay. She is a medical device product specialist and an auditor at TÜV Süd, a German company of greater San Diego. As you heard, she works mostly from home. She does a lot of auditing. I heard she takes some flights and visits a lot of places, although it doesn't seem as exotic as now, because she does talk about how difficult it is sometimes to go from one place to another and have, you know, jet lag as well. But I will tell you a little bit about Vivian. And I think I met you about, what, 6 years ago, perhaps now. She was the director of something called Student Factored, or Student Factor ED, from Salt Lake City Community College in Utah. She had a supply chain project where students would put together kits. And it was funny to see, and I can show you what that kit looks like. I kept it thinking, this is pretty cool. I can, you know, this is going to be my example for whenever I need it. And lo and behold, you know, Vivian is here again. And her tagline on that, it says made by students for students. I don't know if the Bioscope folks find that familiar, but I guess that's where it originally came from. Josie must have remembered something that you did, Vivian. We met at multiple BioLink meetings, and then she left for work in industry. So I hadn't seen her in a while. But then a month ago or 6 weeks ago, Terry and I were talking about having some workshops to do with putting in process and quality. And, you know, we were struggling a little bit until I remembered this book that I picked up from Vivian. And she still had, you know, she had her company name here. And I said, oh my gosh, I need to reach out to her. And lo and behold, she's here today. And so we reconnected, and my memory was finally jogged by that memory jogger. And here, after talking with her for these several meetings, I found out that she had quite a bit of an imprint here at the community college. She taught at Santiago Community College. And if some of you have taken the online quality lesson, you have to blame Vivian for that. She started that here in the California community colleges, and it's taken, you know, it's taken some evolution, but she was the one that helped us put quality into our some of our lessons here. So it seems like we have come full circle, and it's my pleasure to introduce Vivian Ngan Winward as a facilitator for our workshop. Vivian, take it away.
Thank you, Ying-Su, and good morning, everybody. Let me start my screen share without crashing my computer, which is always a bit of a challenge. Okay, so hopefully it's coming through to you now. Just so that you're aware, I'm actually on 2 devices. So videos on my iPad, and I'm just doing the presentation off my laptop. I just was worried that if I tried to do everything on one device, something would crash. So let me first start with just talking a bit about what I think maybe some of you may be suffering from with regard to how to bring quality into your teaching. And I talked a little bit with Terry and Yingsu about this, and I think they sort of share what I believe to be true, which comes from the time that I spent in the community college, as a program director and also as a faculty member to teach quality to students. So I suspect if you are feeling a little bit uncomfortable with it, it's because you're not quite sure how to bring it in to your teaching and to integrate it into your laboratory-based activities, and possibly what does that look like when you bring it in. And I think maybe what I could do is help you understand that there is a way of thinking about quality that you should have in order for things to start making sense to you. So let me start by making you aware of some of the definitions. So sometimes people ask, well, how do you define quality? And there's many different ways, but some of the more common definitions are these. So fitness for use, meaning the product is fit for use in the way that it was intended. It could also be considered to be conformance to requirements. And you can also think of quality as a pursuit of excellence. So those are the most, I think, different ways that you can think about quality in a product, and it could also fit to services as well. It takes a little bit of tweaking to translate it to the service industry, but it is possible. So how you should think about quality is quality should be inherent in the process that you are looking at in it of itself. And it should also be inherent in the product, which is the output of the process, or services if you're in the service industry. And I make this point because I think sometimes if you're not familiar with quality and what does that mean and how it relates, you might be tempted to think about it as something that's extra or that you have to add to whatever it is you're looking at. So from a teaching standpoint, if you have some kind of a laboratory activity and you want to build in quality, it's really not an extra thing or an extra layer. It's actually inherent in the process. And you probably already are doing some of that and may not realize that that ties to quality. So I think I will try to help you understand how that works. Why am I not going forward now? I don't know if I'm stuck. Okay, here. Okay, so in order to achieve quality, what you would need to do if you were a manufacturer or a service provider is set up a quality system. So what is that? It's really just a set of processes, resources, rules, requirements that are completely controlled in a way that you need in order to ensure that the output is as expected. So once you have a quality system that's set up, you have to manage it. And that system gets managed in a couple of main ways. So one way is by proactively planning And that helps give you the confidence that all of the quality requirements that has been defined will be met. So this is what we call quality assurance. And this is different from reactive planning or reactive checking, or also inspecting, which is done in after the fact to ensure that the output will actually meet the requirements by weeding out anything that isn't in compliance. So that's quality control. So if you've ever wondered the distinction between the two terms, quality assurance versus quality control, then that's, I think, should help put things into perspective for you. So the key is having that quality system established and implemented, and having all the quality requirements defined. So quality requirements will include the requirements that you have for the product or the service. So those are normally considered the specifications, and also the requirements for the process itself. So how do you execute the process so that you get the product or the service as an output as expected? So I invite you to ask questions at any time. So you can just unmute yourself, or if you want to submit it to the chat, that's fine too. I would ask that Yingsu, if you don't mind monitoring the chat for questions in case there are some that come through, just stop me and then we can discuss those.
Sure thing.
Okay, so hope I haven't lost you yet. I think that what might help to really get at understanding how inherent things are, I want to use an analogy. And the analogy will be cooking, which has some parallels with laboratory work, and your kitchen, which would be essentially the manufacturing environment. So I will go through a couple of product examples. I just pulled a couple of recipes off the internet, one for some lasagna and one for some chocolate chunk cookies. And I'll show you in those recipes what is inherent in them that is correlating to quality. But before I actually do that, let me just give you a little bit of more background. So we talked about the quality system, and we said that includes, the controlling of the processes and any resources, which are people as well as equipment and supplies and those kind of things, and any procedures or rules that you might have. So with regard to the processes in the quality system that you might have in this case, you may have some processes, some of which may be routine. So for cooking, you would have to do some grocery shopping where you're going to procure whatever you need. You would need to, while you're doing that, make sure you buy the right ingredients and the right amount of ingredients. There may be some preparations that you have to do before you can actually start cooking. So that could include things like, chopping things up, or preparing the kitchen area in some way that fits to what you're going to be cooking. And then the cooking tasks themselves. So that could be several that you have to do in sequence in order to execute the recipe. And then there may be some cleaning that you have to do after the fact. Then with regard to policies or rules, they can come in a number of forms. So some examples could be that you choose to have organic produce when you buy produce. That could be one of your policies. You may have a policy that, hey, I'm going to be cooking and preparing gluten-free as much as possible because you have someone in your household that needs that. Or alternatively, it could be vegetarian because it's a need within the household. You may have dedicated cutting boards for meat that's separate from cutting boards for vegetables. So that is certainly a possible rule or policy. And then you have to have the right kind of equipment in order to be able to execute the various cooking tasks. So for example, you might choose to have a stand mixer instead of a handheld mixer. That might be better for throughput, because if you set the stand mixer up, you can walk away, do something else while it's mixing, for example. You would also need different types of knives for different types of cutting purposes. So cutting up meats and cutting up vegetables and or bread, those could use different types of knives. And you would need different types and sizes of pots and pans for the different purposes of the actual cooking task. And it would be difficult for you to, let's say, boil up pasta for your family in a frying pan. That just doesn't work, right? So we know that we have to have a certain kind of cooking pot for that purpose. And then, of course, not to forget the qualification of staff. They need to be trained appropriately for the different tasks that they are going to be doing, and also be trained to use the equipment properly that they would need for that purpose. So at this point, I'll take a stop to see if there are any questions about this concept.
Yeah, there is one question from Nick Camp. He wanted to know, how extensive does this quality system need to be? Does it need to be written down? How is this done and shared within the company or the class?
So generally, in a quality system, if a manufacturer were to set up a quality system, it has to be documented. So I say this because there are certifications, ISO certifications that manufacturers could choose to get their quality system certified. So the most common one is the ISO 9001 certification. So that's for general quality systems, not any particular kind. But if you are in certain industries, so for example, the medical device industry, the more relevant ISO standard is not 9001, it's 1345, which is the standard for a quality management system specifically for medical device manufacturers. So I bring this to your attention because in the time of COVID now, there are many manufacturers in the IVD or in vitro diagnostic world that is making test kits for COVID-19. So there probably are tons of jobs out there where manufacturers are realizing they need to scale up, and they're hiring like crazy, or they have been, to fulfill the resource needs to be able to put out these kinds of test kits. And those are an example of a medical device. So in vitro diagnostics is part of the grouping of medical device, and it's just a subcategory. And that standard applies to all the medical device manufacturers that make those kits. So in terms of documenting, you would first have to decide what processes do I need in my business in order to be able to fulfill the mission and vision of the business itself. So if you're making IVD kits, then you're going to need assorted processes, some of which are fairly standard, and you would need them for almost any industry. So purchasing raw materials is standard, right? Designing a product is fairly standard. And then manufacturing whatever you designed is fairly standard. And then there are the support processes that help ensure that those three processes work out properly. So that would include training to make sure all people are appropriately trained for anything that they do. And then there is a need to manage the risks involved in the whole organization. So that includes purchasing, design, manufacturing. And then you have to have a way to deal with things that happen that are not expected. So these could be non-conformances that happen internally, meaning that either somebody did something wrong, not necessarily on purpose, and that led to some kind of deviation. Sometimes the deviation leads to a faulty product, meaning that that product is not good anymore. It has the fitness for use is not there. And that could come through in QC testing. And that would essentially make the product unusable and unsellable to whoever your customer is. Now, if you somehow don't catch this, you could send product out the door unknowingly that there's something wrong with it, but then you find this out when your customers complain to you. So when they do that, you have customer complaints officially, and you need a way to deal with those things. And when you either internally find that something is wrong or your customer tells you something is wrong, you obviously need to properly react to that. And that is why there's a separate process generally established for investigating what went wrong and what the root cause was, or maybe it's more than one. And then also to determine what are the appropriate actions in order to react to whatever went wrong. So that generally comes in the form of corrective actions and also preventive actions, if it makes sense to have those as well, along with the actual correction, which is focused directly on the actual thing that went wrong, not necessarily on the root cause, which is what the corrective and preventive actions address. So all of those things are fairly routine processes that a medical device manufacturer or IVD manufacturer would have to set up, and it all has to be documented in procedures, which is usually how it looks when you document a quality system. And you've probably heard of the term standard operating procedure or SOP. So those types of documents are generally where you're describing your different processes and the requirements within those processes that you expect everyone internally to follow. So I think I answered that question. If there's further questions on that, I can certainly address.
Yeah, there's a couple more. Tom says, how does creativity and problem solving fit in the scheme of QA and QC? For example, in the case of unintended occurrences.
I think that probably fits more under quality assurance. So you need to be creative to make sure that your requirements and the planning that you do in advance or proactively will allow you to end up with the output that you expect, right? So if you are good at backwards thinking, meaning that you can look at, okay, I want this end product. What do I need to do to be able to get here? And where are the different ways that I can foresee things going wrong? Then that's where the creativity would come in. In terms of quality control, we really don't want creativity there because there should be very structured and disciplined ways of doing the inspections or testing to ensure that you're being consistent every time in order to make sure that you're not missing things, or sometimes you do it this way versus that way, which doesn't really help you address in a quantitative manner the requirements. And could you repeat that one question again? I think there's a piece I missed in there.
So it says, for example, in the case of unintended occurrences.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if there are unintended occurrences, then like non-conformities that you identify internally to the company or through customer complaints, there has to be then some investigation in order to get at the root cause. So that may need some creative thinking in making sure that you're as open-minded as possible to what would actually be the root cause, because the biggest problem most people have when they do root cause analysis is they're not open-minded enough, and they don't let the analysis lead them to the cause or causes. They already have something in mind, which you should not have, because if you're already thinking that, oh, this is the cause, then you skew yourself into believing that this is the cause when it may not be at all.
That's really interesting. I'm already learning so much. I'm typing like crazy. Another question is, can you clarify the need for quality system to be classified as ISO 9001? How necessarily is it?
So ISO certifications are generally not legally mandatory. So for example, in the US, the FDA, of course, governs all types of medical devices, and you cannot put anything on the US market without the FDA's approval or clearance. So generally for medical devices, it's a clearance that you're looking for as opposed to an approval, with the exception of some higher risk devices that are novel. They might have to go through a full approval process. And the FDA only recognizes that as the official way that you can get product to market. So as part of the FDA requirements, medical device manufacturers are required to set up a quality system. And you can see that in the CFR 820. But it doesn't specifically say that the quality system has to be certified. That's voluntary. But it does help to get it certified because it shows that somebody has come in, a third party, and has come in and looked at your quality system, essentially audited it against the requirements in the ISO 9001 standard or the 1345 standard for medical device manufacturers, and deemed that it is conforming to those requirements written in the ISO standard. So by having a certified quality system, it's declaring that you have set one up and it fulfills at the minimum of those requirements in the various ISO standards that you might be certified against.
Okay.
So not required, but a lot of manufacturers do it because this is the way that you can show that, hey, I have set up a quality system, and it's not just, it's at a certain level of proficiency, and it meets the minimum requirements for what is expected of quality systems.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to your talk so we don't get too granular. Yeah.
I see there's other questions and we can address them later or offline. Okay, so now if we shift to quality assurance, going back to our analogy of cooking and being in the kitchen, what are we doing that assures quality? So this is all that proactive planning work, right? So you obviously, before you cook, most of us have some kind of recipe that we're following, right? I don't know that many people that are able to just cook off the cuff, but some people do. But the recipe acts as the documentation of two things. It lists all of your ingredients that you need, and it gives you the instructions. So right there within the recipe, you have not only the list of the ingredients, but you have some requirements for those ingredients. So if I take this to manufacturing terms, you have your bill of materials and you also have your raw material specifications. So what does that mean? Well, in order to manufacture a batch of something, you need to know how much of each of the components that you need as raw material to go into that batch. So you would specify exactly what material, and usually within the manufacturer, there's a part number that they assign to each material that they purchase, because sometimes it may be confusing if you have similar material that isn't identical. So you can imagine, oh, I don't know, if you have to use water, let's say, maybe you buy several different grades of water, because you probably have seen there's, molecular biology grade, there's some percentage pure, there's HPLC grade. So those different grades act as specifications for each of those different raw material items. And then those specifications help you make sure that you buy the right raw materials for your manufacturing batch, or in this case, the recipe. And then the other part of the recipe are the step-by-step instructions, right? The procedure for how to cook whatever it is you're cooking. And that is important because it gives you the requirements for the process so that you can ensure the outcome of the cooking is as expected. Then along with the recipe, you might have to have equipment that you use, of course, but that equipment might have to be validated and even maintained in an appropriate way. So examples of this, if you're using a food processor, is it capable of chopping up your ingredients to the level that you expect and in the time frame that you expect? If you're using an oven, is the temperature calibrated so that when you set it at 375, it really is 375 plus or minus, a few degrees, and not something that's a bit off, because as you know, if your temperature is off, then the cooking time is going to be different than what you need, or maybe you can't even get it, the output that you're hoping for, if the cooking temperature cannot be met. And then if you have a timer on that oven, is that calibrated? So to make sure that you are cooking for the right duration at that particular temperature. And then finally, there should be certain points within the process that are critical control points that you need to, at those points, do some kind of checking. And when you check, there should be some kind of criteria that you're checking against. And if it meets the criteria, you go forward. If it doesn't meet the criteria, it becomes not acceptable. And then you have to stop and determine, what do you do now? Is there a way to salvage the situation? So that could lead to some kind of reworking, or is it not salvageable and you just have to scrap and start over? And these critical control points for manufacturing is very important, because if you are making, let's go back to the IBD test kit for COVID-19. If you have a critical control point and you don't bother to check, then you could be proceeding with in-process material that will not let you achieve the desired product. So for example, let's use, let's say you're purifying some protein, So sometimes people purify their own restriction enzymes, for example. And before you put that into the kit to be used for the kit, you should check whether or not the purifying process is actually working and you're actually recovering the restriction enzyme in various stages of the purification, and especially at the very end of the purification, because if somehow you've lost it, or the function is not it's not performing properly, then there's no point continuing on and then putting a little tube in a kit that gives you no restriction enzyme activity. That is not helpful. So these critical control points are very important in the process for you to monitor. So as I mentioned here as an example, one critical control point could be checking to make sure that the oven has reached the appropriate temperature before you start baking, right? If you don't want to start your baking before it has reached that temperature, because then now it's difficult to judge how long you must bake it for, and the result sometimes doesn't quite work out if you put it in too early. Any questions on the quality assurance aspect?
No, go ahead and
okay,
continue.
Okay, then quality control. This is a reactive type of activity, and you have to do the checking in a number of different places. So you could have a final inspection where you're checking each and every unit of whatever you have just manufactured for defects. So in this cooking analogy, it could be you're checking for parts that are burnt, or looking for individual parts or units that haven't cooked properly, and getting rid of those. You may need to do some kind of testing for functionality. So that could be in cooking a taste test. But if we were looking at an IBD kit, for example, there would need to be some kind of performance test on one or a few units out of that batch to ensure that the kit performs as expected before you start selling them to customers. And then that helps you identify, when you do this inspection or testing, what might be non-conforming, and you would have to segregate all the units that are not conforming and then decide what you're going to do about that. Can it be reworked in some way, or do you have to scrap it? So I think that part of it is fairly straightforward. Any questions on quality control versus quality assurance?
There is a question regarding, is there any flow chart that you can share an example of what you're showing here, like a QA example of cooking? Is that something that the teachers, the faculty can come up with too?
I don't have a flow chart for QA as it relates to cooking, but maybe the next steps that I'm going to take in this workshop will help you. So what I've done, I'm going to have to unshare and share a different thing. Let me just see if I can. So what I did was I mentioned some recipes off the internet, and maybe this will address that question. And I set it up so that you can follow some of these aspects of quality assurance in these recipes. So let me try to share this. Okay, so let's start with the lasagna recipe. So you can see in this lasagna recipe, and I've annotated it, and I will give these two recipes to you with the annotations. And the annotations are kind of on the right here, which may be a bit too small for you to read. But here you have essentially the batch size has been declared for you, right? This says that if you follow this recipe, you will make 8 servings. So your batch size is 8. Here's your ingredients list. And you can see that every item or ingredient that you need or raw material is listed, and the quantity is listed, right? A pound or 5 individual cloves or 1 can that has a certain volume in it. That is all declared for quantity, but also characteristics about each of the ingredients is specified. So it's not just any sausage, but sweet Italian sausage. Not just any ground beef, but lean ground beef. Not just any onion, but a white onion. So you can see already that there are some characteristics that are listed for each of the ingredients that you now have to consider when you go and purchase whatever it is you need for this recipe, because you can't just buy any random thing, and you have to make sure you buy the right amount of whatever it is you need. Now, this recipe doesn't specifically have this, but I have seen recipes where you need a certain brand of something, where whoever wrote the recipe claims that you must use that brand, other brands don't work. So keep that in mind as well. And then if we scroll further down, the instructions give you now the requirements for the process, the cooking process for the lasagna. And some of the things that I have marked here, the part where it says until the meat is well browned, that could be considered to be a critical control point, right? That you have to keep checking for the meat to be browned. You don't proceed until it has been browned. And once it's browned, you've met that criteria, and you can now proceed with the rest of the recipe. Here there's a comment by the writer of the recipe that instead of wine, you can substitute it with either red wine or broth of chicken or beef nature as you wish. Bringing to a simmer is another possible control point where you must check that it reaches a simmer first, and only after that point do you reduce your heat and then start your timer to count down the hours spent. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 4, but until it starts to simmer, you cannot reduce your heat. So, I hope this helps you now see that there is quality it's inherent in this process, right? If you are to write this recipe, if you don't specify some of these things, the process won't work out and you won't get the result that you expect, which is the lasagna that fulfills, the title of this recipe, which is something about amazing lasagna. Then here's another one. This definitely is a critical control point, where it says pour hot water directly over the noodles, making sure the pasta is completely immersed in the water. So if your pasta isn't completely immersed in the water, it's not going to work, right? I think you can imagine what the outcome might be if it's not completely immersed. And then I mentioned the preheating before. That could be a critical control point. So I marked up this for you, and you can look at that to kind of refresh yourself on the inherentness of quality in cooking a lasagna. Then let's quickly go through the chocolate chip cookies recipe. So again, here you have a batch size, 12 cookies, and the ingredients are very similar. You have quantity, and then you have characteristics about each of the ingredients. There's no brand mentioned here, but could be. And then in the rest of the recipe, the instructions for what to do, they have very important criteria for the process. So until a paste forms with no lumps, that is a criteria for the process. Could also be a critical control point where you're checking for the lumps, because the lumps will be visible initially and then it should go away the more you whisk things together. Then here's another one. Beating until light ribbons fall off the whisk and remain for a short while before falling back into the mixture. So that's a very descriptive requirement that you have to meet with regard to whisking the egg and the vanilla together. And this recipe, actually, if you look it up, there's a little video and it kind of shows you what this looks like. Then fold the mixture in with a spatula. So if you are a cook, you understand folding means folding and not stirring. And a spatula is specified and it's not anything else. And then even says here, be careful not to over mix, which would cause the gluten in the flour to toughen. So this is a very, it's like a caution statement to help you understand what could happen if you do it too much, because sometimes people think doing it a lot is good, but not too much. And then here's another criteria for more intensive flavor, toffee-like, a deeper color, chill the dough overnight. So that's a specific process requirement. We have the preheating again, and then for putting the cookies on the cookie sheet just before baking, this is a specific requirement to leave at least 4 inches of space between cookies and 2 inches from the edges of the pan so that you have enough space for spreading out. And this will actually help you with achieving the consistency that you want, right? You want all cookies to be roughly the same shape and not weirdly shaped because you put them too close together and they started to run into each other, and that they cook evenly wherever they are. And then for the cooking, there's a time duration, but there's also this qualifying comment until the edges have started to brown. So that could also be a critical control point. So I hope that these two analogies have helped you see that there are quality aspects inherent in your processes, and that you may already be looking at some of these without realizing that you are looking at quality aspects. Any questions at this point?
This is so amazing, Vivian. I'm going to view life very differently now with cooking every day.
Does it make you hungry?
It makes me hungry, and it makes me think about all these different things. I never realized that I was doing quality checks. And I think that's what your point is, and it has really gotten through that. Okay, so some questions. Jan had a question. I don't know if she's back, but wouldn't there be some QC testing during the cooking manufacturing process?
Yes, there probably would be. I would say that, so this is obviously a recipe that you would make inside your own kitchen. If you were doing it on a commercial scale, it would be much, much larger. And you when you scale up, if any of you have done scale up, especially in terms of culturing bacteria, you realize that when you scale up, there are some scale up issues that you would not realize could happen. So what might happen in a commercial kitchen is that if in that first step where it says whisk together the sugar, salt, and butter until a paste forms with no lumps, one of your in-process QC checks could be somebody takes a sample of that mixture, or maybe more than one sample, and then it looks at it carefully by kind of breaking it up completely to see whether or not there are lumps. And if there are lumps, you have to keep mixing. If there are no more lumps, you can proceed. So that could be a place where you could do in-process check. Probably same for number 2, where it says, whisking the egg and vanilla beat until you have these light ribbons. So you could use that as a way to QC check that step of the process, because in the way this recipe is set up, you do step one is separate and independent of step 2, and at some point later you put them together, right? So there's no point putting 1 and 2 together if either 1 or 2 is not done correctly. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I like that you said that you are in process QC checking.
Yeah.
And I think we do that all the time. I do that when I'm cooking.
Yeah, so those critical control points are those places in the process that you do QC checking or inspection or testing, right? So you can imagine that there would be places in your laboratory activity where it would make sense to just take a breath and check something before you go on, because maybe you shouldn't go on if what you think has happened hasn't actually happened yet.
Okay. Let's see. I think that was, I haven't caught on to the rest of this stuff. People are really chiming in here. And Nick said, is it okay to taste it?
Yeah, I mean, people taste cookie dough all the time, or even your lasagna mix before you assemble. So that is part of QC testing. I mean, I think if you talk to any chef that works at a restaurant, they're always testing tasting to make sure that it's right before you start doing things, especially when whatever meat is cooked and they put on whatever special sauce on top. You got to make sure that the sauce tastes correct before you put whatever it is on. Otherwise you've wasted the meat.
Okay. Here's a really good question. So the in-process QC testing falls under QA?
So this is I can see how the question has come. The testing itself or checking is under quality control, but you plan for this testing under quality assurance, right? So as part of your quality assurance, you decide in the process where those critical control points might be and what are the criteria at those critical control points must be met. So whatever those acceptance criteria are for you to proceed, you declare that up front. And that is part of the quality assurance aspect. But then when you're actually working through the process and you have to conduct the QC inspection or testing, that execution is under quality control and not quality assurance.
Wow, that's a really nice explanation. I never really got that. So thank you so much. And Kathy's also saying thanks here. Let's see.
So do you mind if I ask a quick clarification, Yingsu, just so
Sure,
I
go ahead.
understand? So this means that QA determines some of those QC testing at critical points.
Yes.
Okay.
So the planning that's part of quality assurance includes what you will do for quality control. And the execution of that is the quality control.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Vivian.
You're welcome. Hi, Linnea.
Hi, it's so good to see you.
Okay, here's another question that Tom has. He's trying to understand the real world situation. Is QA under R&D or manufacturing?
So it's actually neither. It's independent. So quality, which includes the assurance and the control, it should be separate from the design and then the manufacturer. And you have to have that independence so that there's no bias, right? So so I can tell you that when I go in and audit manufacturers, one of the things that we have to look at is how have they organized their business units within the company. And you always want to see in the org chart that the manufacturing group is completely separate from the quality group. Because, you know, if you've ever worked at a company, you'll realize that if there is no separation, there will always be pressure from the manufacturing people to say, I made this batch, there's an urgent order, you know, our favorite customer who buys, you know, $1 million worth of stuff from us every year desperately needs it, just release the batch. And quality should never be influenced like that. So this is why they have to be separate. Does that make sense? But that's not to say that the people within quality, they do work with the people in the design phase, like R&D, and in the manufacturing phase to ensure that things are set up properly, right? So as part of setting up the design process and setting up the manufacturing process for a particular product, quality people are involved in that. But the actual reporting lines and how they are to function, they need to be separate.
I was just going to say that you're talking about, in a way, quality is infused in creating the product, yet it has to be separate. And I think sometimes that can be confusing, that, you know, sort of the two separate, it is a separate layer and it's not a separate layer at the same time.
I think you can think of that. So when I say it's separate, I mean the people, right? The function within the organization, the responsibilities are separated, but quality is everybody's responsibility. And that is a mantra that you should hear if you ever walk into any, next time you find yourself doing a tour at a company, ask them about, their quality, how does that work? And a lot of times they will have posted their quality policy. It's, various posters all over the walls as you walk through different rooms or hallways. There will probably be some statement about quality in that policy. And the quality policy is for everyone to follow within the company. So I think don't confuse the organizational structure with how the quality aspects of things should be handled. It is completely integrated, but the people that have the responsibility for setting up the the planned activities, that's quality assurance, and making sure that everyone in the other areas like R&D and like production are doing the appropriate things for quality planning. That falls under the quality assurance group, which is organizationally a separate, reporting line. Same as quality control, that the people doing the testing are not the same people manufacturing the product. And you must have that separation. It's kind of like the church and state thing, right? You don't want the mixing because then there's bias, right? I cannot check my own work. That usually is not allowed in many circles, right? Especially regulatory circles. You cannot check your own work. Somebody has to do it independently of you. And that's the way that you can think about the organization. But the quality, the doing of the quality is inherent in the process. It has to be, or else you will have so many non-conforming product that only, maybe 30% of what you're making is okay to sell. And that used to be what it was like in the early days before people embraced this concept of quality and making sure it was built in.
Wow, that's really nice to hear that.
So I have one question too, and I hope you don't mind me asking the group this. And I know I just jumped in, and Sandy was, anyway, so for me to get my students to embed QC, QA, and quality systems into their brain so they'll be appropriate for a company, I had to have them live that in our program. And even if our school doesn't agree with me, I had to put it into our program and live by that so that the students would actually not feel it was punishment. It was a way to enforce that they wanted to enforce quality themselves concerning what they were learning and how they learn.
Yes, that is the appropriate way to get them work ready for the industry.
Yeah. My dean doesn't always like that idea.
I can imagine. I can talk to your dean for you if you like.
Sandy, did you have a question too?
Yeah, I do. I had the idea that sometimes when people are manufacturing products, that some of the QC steps at the control points might be carried out by manufacturing technicians. Is that not correct?
The in-process QC steps can be, depending on what the testing or the checking is.
Okay.
But the final QC should never really be done by manufacturing. There are times where the in-process QC is done by the QC department, not manufacturing, because of the complexity of whatever the testing needs to be. So maybe QC is always set up to do this test anyway. So it doesn't make sense for manufacturing to have an area where they have to set up to do this test, especially if you're also concerned about possible contamination, right? That you have to test it in a space that might not already be contaminated with something, because you're maybe checking for contamination. So that would be a reason for not doing it as part of manufacturing. So the final QC, though, is not the responsibility of manufacturing, because in the end, if there is testing that's done by QC, they would do it. And then quality assurance, QA, reviews everything. And they're the ones that say at the very end, everything is up to snuff and I release the product. So from a regulatory standpoint, some of the newer regulations now require that there is a responsible person for releasing the product, and you have to document who that is. So that person's name and signature, whatever their declaration that things are okay and the batch is released, has to be documented in the batch records. Good question.
Okay. So a question here is, I think you've answered it, is the quality system is like an umbrella over everything, right?
The quality system, you can, is not really separate from, let's say, the R&D and the manufacturing parts, which is the main part of a manufacturing company. It is just, it's included in there.
Okay.
So if you think about, you know, when we say quality system, what do we mean? We're looking for, did you define the processes that you need to run your company? So if you're making a product, then you have at least manufacturing activities. So have you defined that process for all the different products that you're making? So you could imagine that if you're making, if you're purifying an enzyme, that's going to look different than making buffers, right? So those are two distinct manufacturing processes, but it's under the manufacturing group. And each of those processes need to get defined with appropriate requirements. How do you do that? You write procedures on how to execute the protein purification, or how do you execute the buffer making. So that is part of the intrinsic or inherent part of these processes, the R&D one and the manufacturing one, where in order to execute those processes in a really good way, you have to build in this quality. So it's not really separate. It's just a different way to look at those manufacturing or R&D processes. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense, for me at least. How is everyone doing on time and like bio breaks? We're at 10:15-ish. Should we take about a 10-minute break for now? Vivian probably needs a break as well.
Sure, we could take a break.
Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 10:25 or so, 10:27, something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Wow, Vivian, I've learned so much already.
Hey, I have a quick question for Terry and Vivian and everything. So having never worked in industry, having set up my program on my own, so I could, and then helping others set up a program, embedding quality took time, because it takes time to embed that in yourself and then embed it in the students. I almost feel like you have to come up with a process to take someone from 0 to 100 and give them, you know, a time so they don't feel overwhelmed. I don't know if you know what I mean. I know that when I educate high school teachers to go from 0 to 100, they said, we need 5 years to be able to do that. So then we would have benchmarks every year for how they changed their program and how they made their students part of the process. And I'm kind of wondering if that would be helpful in terms of this, so no one feels as though they have to do it all at once. You know?
Well, from a manufacturing standpoint, let's say that you started off being like a smaller group of people, like a startup. You started R&D, you know, you and your friends got together, you created a company, and you have this great product, you know, you want to eventually sell. And as you start with R&D, you may not be thinking about setting up a proper quality system. Then you realize, as you're getting closer to being able to start manufacturing, that, hey, the FDA requires me to have this set up. then you now have to implement the system. And you can't just one day not have anything and then the next day you have it, the full thing. It won't work. So you have to build it piece by piece, and it's okay, because in the end you have to have it all, but it doesn't mean you have to have it all from the very beginning. And you can decide what part do you want to build in first. And for manufacturers, probably the easiest thing is, as you're getting to the end of your R&D, you may realize, oh shoot, I never put in place design control, and I'm required to by law. So now you have to retroactively create the procedures. And sometimes you can use existing data, you don't have to redo everything. But if your existing procedures don't quite fit what you did, then maybe you do have to repeat some things. And validation is one of those places where oftentimes you have to repeat, unless you somehow manage to design your validations with the right things in mind before you established the quality system piece on validation. So there's nothing wrong with doing it piecemeal. And you can, you could even start as small as, okay, we are making a bunch of stuff in this class or in our program, but I'm just going to start with this one product, right? You set up all the documents you need and describing all the processes and QC, QA, whatever you need for that one product. Then it's easy then to expand it to the second product, because you now have that first one already laid out.
If I can jump in, I like to say this summer I learned how to spell IQ, OQ, PQ. Yeah. So that was with my software company. We started to support some regulated processes for anti-idiotype therapies. Some of the pre-CAR T things people were doing with antibodies for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so we had a couple clients, and what we learned is so we're supplying the software to support the process, but we had to build a quality management system and the supporting documentation around how they validate our software in their operations. So when you start to think about this, there's one, validating your process, building the QA and then the QC pieces that go with that. The other piece to learn about is that those instruments you use in the process need to be validated and calibrated. And some of those you might even be able to get documentation from the companies that supply them, because if they're supporting regulated processes, they need to have, they've often built packages that have, those basic pieces, IQ, OQ, PQ. And for those who don't know what they are, they're the qualification docs. The IQ is the installation qualification. OQ is the operational qualification, and PQ is the performance qualification. And there's all these, degrees of nuance between why they're different. I just wanted to add that.
You're welcome. And I could mention that IQ and OQ is pretty standard for the manufacturer of the software or other equipment to provide. And if they've done it appropriately, according to either FDA regulations or ISO requirements, you can use that as is. There's not a lot you need to do other than just install it and operate it as they have recommended. But the PQ part is usually what you have to do as the purchaser of the software or equipment, because the manufacturer of that software or equipment can't do that for you, because you have to do it in your setting with the exact product that you're making, right? So the PQ part, performance qualification, has to be done by the manufacturer that intends to use the software and or equipment in the way that they will for their own operations.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And a big piece of our education that summer was learning what our role was versus our customer's role, and being able to negotiate that process. So so we didn't walk off any cliffs, as it were.
You know, one thing I found interesting is, so in many ways, student involvement is really important, because if you think about it, isn't it no different than making sure that your technician and your company, whether they be in Phil or R&D, has a lot of input into the company itself, right? And that is a quality principle. But you know, one thing I noticed is they did a better job of student input when they were setting up their programs. And then once the program was set up, if they hadn't incorporated exercises within the program itself that had students duplicate some of the setting up of the program or the quality system, you know, setting up the quality system associated with the program and lab and everything, then they started to go to the route that it was easier to not have the students involved anymore. I don't know if you know what I mean. It's just like, it was better when they were really hungry and they didn't have anything and nothing was set up, than when they finally had everything set up.
Yes, so that is a syndrome that is not uncommon, unfortunately. So I think, you know, as you teach your students about quality, make sure you stress this one point, which is that when manufacturers get big enough, and you don't even have to be very big to be this big enough, they start to say, okay, we have this quality system now, so we just control everything, right? So we write all the documents, people just follow it exactly. They don't look left, they don't look right, they just go straight forward, and they're not allowed to think for themselves, essentially. And that is the exactly wrong thing to do when you set up and enforce a quality system within a manufacturing environment. You don't want robots. You want people who can think, because sometimes when there are problems, the best way to avoid them is to have observant people that can look and see, this isn't like it has been. You know, I don't recall this solution ever being slightly yellow. This is not the way it should be. Because if it's a robot thinking that you are creating, the person will just keep on going, right? I'm just, oh, well, I did it like I always do it. Followed it like it said, and okay, I don't know what's going on this time. It's a little yellow. But that's not what you want, right? You want someone to go, hey, something's not right. And that's that way of proactively catching problems before they become really bad, that you want your people to be able to help with. So the ownership of each task that the person is supposed to be doing under a quality system, that has to be maintained, right? You can't take away from the person, especially the lower level technicians who are, you know, just getting in on the ground floor. They should not be treated as if you don't really know anything. Just follow the procedures, right? Everything's spelled out for you. Don't worry about it. That's really not the mindset you want to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I agree that yes, that is not something that is preferred, but unfortunately it happens more often than not.
Yeah, good point.
What I used to do when I taught was to have one class was the media and solution class, where they were manufacturing their own media and solutions, and they were also doing their own QC, which I know probably shouldn't have happened that way. But then they would use that media and solutions in their biotech class. So we had manufacturing and batch records and SOPs in one, and then using it, being the customers in the other. Kind of a way to separate. They're not perfect.
Let's get back to Vivian's. Let's get back to Vivian's talk now that we're at 10:29. So Vivian, would you like to continue, please?
Yes. Let me share again the presentation. So I put in the chat those 2 recipes that were annotated. So now you have those. Okay, so we've defined what quality is. So let's proceed and look at what is process mapping, which will be important for you to understand. So why we should process map, there are some clear benefits. So these are the main ones. You want a way to very clearly and in a non or less misunderstood way what the sequence of activities in that process should be, right? If you write procedures, sometimes words are misunderstood or misinterpreted because of just how people read, or they may have some biases that cause them to interpret it in a way that you did not want. You also want to show how the different activities might be interrelated. And this is important when you have a process that has many different steps and they are not necessarily all linear, that you have some parallel branches and at some points they feed together. You need to understand the relationships. And then sometimes you have activities in one branch that might affect the activities in a separate branch. So having it mapped out will help people understand these interrelationships. And then when you have everything mapped out, it becomes much clearer how you need to coordinate the activities in order for all of them collectively to achieve that common goal that you wish, which is that output, and then yield results that are valued by you as the manufacturer, as well as the customer who receives what you manufacture. And then finally, having it mapped out helps you identify what is the actual value chain. So the value chain is defined as all of those activities and steps that you do that contribute to the value of that process, which you may find when you map all of this out that you have some steps that don't really contribute to the value or contribute very little to the value. So it's important to know what the value chain is within your process, because when you are looking at improvements, you want to eliminate as much as possible any steps or activities that don't really contribute to value. So this is the idea behind the lean concept. So if you've heard of lean, like lean manufacturing, where you're removing as much as possible all of the waste that could happen, that is part of this value chain idea. So if that is the why and the benefits for process mapping, let's first look at how a process gets defined. So this is kind of a big picture view of how you might consider a process, right? So you have a process, and then you can see the blow up along the top specifies there's 4 different activities within this process. But in order to execute the process, there are inputs. So inputs could be raw materials, for example, could be certain requirements or expectations. And then the input is provided by some kind of a supplier. And then in order to execute the activities, you require resources, right? So those could be people, they could be the actual equipment that you have to use, the methods that you use, and then of course the time it takes you to convert the raw materials into some output. And then the output, of course, would be the manufactured item if we're talking about manufacturing. And the output serves the customer of that process. right? Which could be an external customer, but it could also be an internal customer. So keep that in mind, that not always are customers external. Because let's say if you are thinking about R&D and you're developing let's say the next hottest IVD COVID-19 test that can identify whether or not you have COVID in 5 seconds, and you don't even have to be near that person. You could just, hold up a card, 6 feet away, and if the card turns blue, they have COVID, right? If that's going to be your test, you will have an external customer, but you will have internal customers, because as R&D, once you finish your designing or development, it transfers to your manufacturing department, who then now has to make what you designed. So your manufacturing department is your internal customer. And this linear part, this supplier that gives input to the process, which gives you an output to customers, that is considered this acronym SIPOC, that is a common acronym that floats around in the quality arena. So if you haven't already noticed that a lot of these words in the presentations are yellow, I purposely did that to give you some terminology around quality, so that when you work with your students, you can start to ingrain those words into their vocabulary, so that they will sound like they know what they're talking about, and they will when they go into their first job in the industry. So SIPOC is this linear process, and you can see that in this way of viewing a process, the process, when it executes, has some activities that are done, and they are supported by these resources. So this is a fairly basic model for viewing how a process is. So with that in mind, then we can now look at how to deal with complexity in processes when you would like to start mapping them out. So here is an example where there is a more or less linear process, which is taking an order and delivering it to the whatever is ordered to the customer. And there are 5 main parts of this process. So attract customer, take order, invoice customer, deliver product, and install product for the customer. But within each of those boxes, there is a main process, and they've blown up the deliver product part. And you can see that the input to deliver product is coming from the part upstream of it, right? The invoice customer. So that part feeds into this deliver product. And what do you do to deliver product? You have to pick up the order, ship to staging, and then the order gets staged, and then it gets delivered to the customer. But then you can see now each of those boxes has some complexity. There's a sub process for each one of those. So for staging the order, there's a couple of activities, and they are supported by whatever procedures that you have set up. So you can see that when you have to map out a process that has levels of complexity, you're going to have like a map within a map within a map kind of a concept. So keep this in mind as a way to portray what your process might look like. Now, what happens if you have activities that are done by different people? So there's different responsibilities involved for the different activities. Then maybe the way to show it is something like this. So you can see this is like a regular flow chart, but there are these individual lanes, and each lane represents a responsible person or function. And then the step or individual activity that is done, it goes linearly from the top to the bottom, right? So you have the first step, step one says, okay, there's an external customer who identifies a need and they contact what would be department A. And then in this flow chart, it looks like department A then, receives the need from the customer. They have to do something, and then there's a decision. That's the diamond. And depending on whether it's, yes or no, it splits into either the top activity or the bottom activity for department B, and so on and so on. So this is a nice way of very clearly presenting not only the process as it exists in stepwise fashion, what the different steps or activities are, but who will be doing that. So this could be important when you have very complex processes. And then what happens if not only do you have different responsible people for the different activities, but you want to include more details in your process map. So the previous version is a swim lane type of format. You might have something that looks like this, where you have essentially the same kind of thing, same lanes set up, but then you have these other notes that tie to different steps. So this might be a way for you to say, well, okay, I've laid out my process, and now I want to add the critical control points. So it's visually obvious where we're going to do in-process inspection or testing. So this could be what these little notes mean. So for this example, the notes are what is shown on the right there. So that's a different way of showing how this could look. And I think there's some considerations that you need to make when you have a really complicated process. So in the end, you're just taking a flow chart and you're repurposing it in the way that you need to show what you want to show. So it could just be the stepwise activities. You could add resources in, which you could do with the swim lanes, but you don't always have to use swim lanes for that. And you can add inputs and outputs to each activity. So sometimes people, for each of those activity boxes, say that, the input to this might be, these records because they need information from it. And then the output of that activity is a different set of records, so that it's very clear what each step or activity needs to have in order to execute, and then what it generates after it executes. So that's a different way of showing. And as I mentioned, that the format of these process maps can either be swim lane type, or they can be linear, or as linear as they can be with branches as necessary in order to do what you need to show the process correctly. So I have given you some examples, but before I show those, first let me remind you that there is very specific symbols that need to be used, and they are defined. So here, but there's also a chapter in your memory jogger that talks about flow charting, and I think it also shows some of these same symbols and explains to you what each one means. So the key is that the rectangular box is always a step of the process. A diamond always means a decision, usually yes or no. And then you might have an input or an output that is a parallelogram. Documents are usually drawn in that kind of funny shape where it looks like a rectangle, but the bottom edge of it has this is a bit scalloped, as if it looks like a cut off piece of paper. And then if you have beginning or ending points, usually they are either ovals or something that kind of looks like a rectangle, but with very rounded edges. So that usually is the correct symbol for the start of a process and the end of a process. And if your process is very complicated or has long branches, you can use a circle as the symbol to link from this portion of the flowchart to a separate portion of the flowchart, so that let's just say you have two parts. At the bottom of the first part, you'd have a circle. Maybe you put an A in the middle, and then your second part should start with an A, meaning that the two A's connect together, and that's how you would link two different flowcharts together. So I just wanted you to be aware of the symbology that is used. So don't try to use your own shapes, because then it will not be understood correctly. So here is an example of a very simple regular flowchart. So it's not exactly linear because there are some branches, but you can see that it's fairly straightforward. There are some decision points throughout the process, and this is about how to fill an order. So with the beginning of this process being receiving an order, and then the end of the flowchart being mailing the invoice or the bill. And I should mention that when you create these flowcharts, it's always good for each box or shape to start with a verb. That's usually the preferred way to put the content in the different steps, so that you have a very specific statement of what the do is for that step. So here is a more complicated one. So this is also a flow chart, but it incorporates explanations. So you can see on the right, there are explanations for the different steps. And you can even see that for each box, there's a number. So the very top one has a -1, and that refers to explanation number 1. And then the next box below it has a 2. So that refers to explanation number 2. So you can connect explanations to each of these processes as you would like. And sometimes people use the let's say the right side of this table to list not explanations necessarily, but references to documents that people might need. Like if you know that you have to use a certain procedure and a certain batch record, you may list those document numbers there. If there are some important considerations or cautions, you might want to put that on that right side. So it doesn't always have to be an explanation. It could be whatever information you wish to communicate. Then here is another type of process map. So this one is called a spaghetti diagram for good reason. So the way that this is drawn up, it is trying to give you a spatial representation of what must happen when this process is executed. So you can see that there's 5 boxes along the top, right? That's in blue. It's like 1 through 5. So you go through the things in those, you have those stations, and then those are somehow distinct from the set that's in green, which is 6, 7, and 8. And then 9 is kind of in the middle there, but way off to the right. And then 10, 11, 12 is the last set of stations. And you can see that somebody has put along the top and along the left edge of this diagram some information about the distance that these stations might be arranged. And the arrows in the diagram are showing where a person who has to execute the process has to go. So they might start with number one, and then you are technically supposed to be able to follow with the arrows to all the different places they have to go in order to execute whatever the process is. So this is a different way to present what actually happens when the process is executed. It's less of a process map and more of a reality of the situation when you execute the process. But I show this because this is useful if you are trying to minimize waste in your process. Let's say waste can come in terms of time, right? There's too much time that's being wasted and doesn't add value to the process. And waste could come in movement, where you have to move from one place to another in order to execute the process. And if you didn't have to make that movement, because you have to go from one end of the room to the other end of the room, and if you do that, every time you do execute this process, which could be like 50 times a day, that's, a lot of time spent moving back and forth, that if you rearranged your stations, it might become faster and you can actually have higher throughput without doing any other changes other than rearranging the space. So this is an interesting way to show that kind of activity. And then here's one that is using swim lanes. So this one's now kind of turned 90 degrees. The lanes go left to right instead of up and down. And then you can see for each lane, there's a responsible, either person or function, and they have tasks to do within, their part of the process. So you can see how this is quite complicated. And by laying it out like this, it becomes very clear exactly what steps need to be done by who, in what order, and how the different steps may relate to other steps or not. And by laying it out like this, then you can maybe start to see where some improvements could be made if that is your intention. So any questions on these examples before I go forward?
I don't see anything on the chat. So if anybody has a question that they're dying to ask, please just speak up. I do like your spaghetti map, just because I go to Nick's classroom a lot and we do some kitting, or we have different things set up. I mean, doing a process map to sort of show people where things can be done efficiently without running into people.
Yeah,
I think it's really nice.
So that whole lean manufacturing concept has focused on visually seeing how people are working and how things could be changed in a way that reduces the amount of movement that needs to be done. And waste can come in a lot of forms. So the whole idea about lean is to reduce all sorts of different waste. And that includes waiting time. So if you have to wait for something to come to you before you can do your part, then we also want to minimize that if you want to ensure the most efficient way of manufacturing and to increase the throughput. So this is one of the I think very useful types of diagrams to really clearly present what is actually going on when the process gets executed. And you would like to see as few of those arrows and as few of them crossing and going all over the place as you hope, right? There should be minimal movement and they should all be somewhat sequential as much as possible. Okay, if there are no questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
No questions.
All right, so then remember we talked about value chain. I want to bring your attention to a slightly different type of process mapping called value stream mapping. And this is kind of like that spaghetti diagram, but more than that, because it builds in some details that you would need to analyze your value chain. So the extra details allow you to help identify where waste could be coming from. It could also help you figure out if it's possible to reduce your process cycle times, and also where process improvement efforts could be targeted. And if you draw up these value stream maps, you could certainly have one for what is currently the case, that's current state. And then if you are hoping for an improvement, you could draw up what would become the future state with your improvements implemented to show how different things might be. So let me just show you a couple of examples. So first of all, the symbology is a bit different for value stream mapping. They use these specific examples of symbols, which are more graphical. I think you can relate to them a little bit easier what each one means. And then here is a somewhat complicated, but not overly complicated example of a value stream map. And you can see that this has to do with production of some kind of steel. So it looks like it goes through, let's see, 5 different main activities. And there is the delivery of what looks like coils on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the first activity that happens is there is some kind of stamping that's done. And those numbers and symbols kind of at the bottom half of that diagram shows that for each activity, what is the cycle time, and I can't remember what CO stands for, but there's some times that are detail that's important. So uptime is how often is this process up functioning, and it looks like it's only up 85% of the, let's say, workday, and then it looks like it also shows availability, and then what a batch to process in that step, how long it takes. And then you can see at the very bottom is the kind of the running timeline for how long does it take to actually make whatever this is being made, right? So it doesn't, for our purposes, it doesn't really matter what they're making, but each of those activities for one item is actually very short, right? Stamping takes 1 second to make one, and then it goes on to the next activity, which looks like it's some kind of welding, 39 seconds for that. Then welding number 2 is 56 seconds. And then there's some assembly, step 1, 62 seconds, and then assembly, step 2 is 40 seconds. So if you add all that up, it's not very long, right? It's what, like a couple of minutes. But then look at the in between. It's telling you between stamping and welding number 1, 7.6 days, there's something going on there, I'm not sure why. There's not much information here, but you can see by laying it out like this, you can see where all the time is coming from and why does it take this long to create whatever it is this manufacturing process is making, right? It looks like if you add it up, I don't know if that 23.6 days is correct, but that seems a bit high for that. But you can add up all of those times and you will get, some kind of answer. But the actual processing time, it says, is only 188 seconds. So if you can reduce the waiting time between one of the activities and the next activities, then it will make your process that much more efficient. And you can have much higher throughput, because once this batch is finished, you can start the next batch, right? So if it takes, I don't know, like 10 days to actually go through this whole thing, your process is kind of, all of the resources are stuck for that period of time before a next batch could be started and worked on by those same people and equipment. So this is a very nice way of looking at all the different activities that are happening, how long each one takes, the kind of resources that are being needed for each one. And they can get much more complicated, because if I go back to the symbology, you can see that you can add lots of other details into your value stream map to show more stuff. But I'm not expecting you to necessarily be able to value stream map, but I just wanted to show you that this is something that is used in the industry to help quality assurance people to figure out where can they make adjustments to improve on the processes. Any questions on the mapping types?
No questions on the chat. So if
Okay.
anybody has anything orally, please speak out.
Okay, so let me then go through one more topic, and that is process improvement before we actually get into the hands-on. And yes, I will share this presentation with you. So you can see it's obviously not a PowerPoint. I will give you the link to the Prezi, and you should always be able to access it. So for process improvement, let's go through a couple of kind of main considerations. So one is this idea of continuous improvement, right? That the improvement should always be considered. And it's continuous as opposed to continual, because continual implies that you do it and then you have a break and then maybe you pick it up again a bit later. That's not the idea. The idea is that you're always thinking about improvement and actually improving. And in order to continuously improve, usually the most common process that people use for continuous improvement is based on this idea of plan, do, check, or study, and then act, or also known as PDCA, or the PDCA cycle. So some of you may already be familiar with this. And essentially, this is what you're doing when you go through PDCA. So during the plan phase, you are selecting whatever the project is that you want to improve. You have to define properly the problem as well as your goal, your aim. And then you need to make sure you understand properly the current state. So you're clarifying things and making sure you understand exactly what things are currently. You might need to set up specific targets. So these could be certain KPIs, and it could also be the schedule that you will be following for the project, because maybe that you only have so much time to go through and improve. And then informing and registering the project, that is, I guess it's put in here because sometimes you have to make sure somebody in management is aware so that they can support that for you, but it's not intrinsically required for the actual improvement. And then the plan should include how you intend to solve or come up with the most suitable recommendation for the issue or problem that you're having. So that's plan. Then do is essentially just the execute part of the cycle. So you execute your plan, and while you're executing, you're recording and observing and collecting any data, you're examining, you're prioritizing and analyzing. You may have to justify or evaluate the cost as you're going along. There might be a need to do some investigations to help you hone in on what would be the most likely solutions for the improvement, because usually in your plan you're going to try several things and you want to know which one or ones would be useful. And then you have to do some testing in order to verify that the solutions really will work, and maybe you need to redetermine the costs and benefits for that, and just go through that execution in that manner. Then once you've executed, now you're going to be doing your checking or your studying, right? So you're taking all your data and you're analyzing it and deciding what has worked, if it has worked, if it hasn't worked, what are you going to do about it? And at this point, if what you sought out to do did work, then you are more or less done with that improvement. But if not, and it didn't really work the way you intended, or maybe it partially worked and there's still more improvement that could be done, then you move on to the final phase of acting, which allows you to respond or react to what was done. And so here, if your improvement needed to have management approval, then maybe you haven't yet implemented it, but the testing shows that it will work. So now you can truly implement. But if it didn't necessarily need management approval, you could have already implemented it and just monitored at this point what is happening to make sure that the intended improvement did actually occur and that you didn't generate other problems while you were trying to improve. So this is the cycle for plan, do, check, act. And then if you're wondering when PDCA is useful, it could come in these times. So if you're starting a new improvement project, of course, but you can also use PDCA as part of developing a new process or improving on a new process or product or even service. If you have a repetitive process, you obviously want that process to be as well honed as you can. So you can use PDCA to get to that optimum place that you want a repetitive process to be, to ensure that you have the best efficiency and output. If you need to analyze problems or get to root causes, you might need to use PDCA to help you with that. And then generally any change, which usually comes through improvements, if you want to implement change, whether it's big or small, then PDCA certainly would help you get to that as you use the cycle over and over again. So I think there's been some questions, so I can stop and answer some questions.
Yeah, so Terry asked, where do the QA and QC people fit in the PDCA
Process?
at the end or during the process?
So when you have an improvement, it's usually a team effort. So whoever ends up using the process, so let's say it's a manufacturing process, then there needs to be some representatives from manufacturing on this improvement team. You would likely need to have some quality people on that team, and you will likely need both quality assurance and quality control involved, because quality assurance helps with the planning, and then quality control will likely be impacted by whatever change is going to be made for the improvement. They might not be directly impacted, but they still need to be involved so that they are aware of whether they are or are not impacted. And then you may need to have some other stakeholders as part of the improvement project. So if you think about this as improving a process, then remember our SIPOC, that diagram. That process has inputs coming from an upstream supplier, or you could think of it as, you are their customer, right? So you have to maybe involve somebody from your supplier or supplying entity, and then you have your direct customer of your process, which could be internal, and that needs to have representation so that all the appropriate stakeholders get involved in the improvement so that there's no surprises to anybody. Any other questions?
No, it looks good. I think you can continue.
All right. Okay, so what about then opportunities for improvements, or OFIs? How do you identify them? Generally, the sources for OFIs come from these different areas. So if you have identified nonconformities, this is generally done through your QC inspections or testing, whether it's at the very end or it could be in process. You can use that as a source for looking at improvement potential. When you have customer complaints, so this is external now, your customer that you've sold something to has complained about something, that should also be an opportunity for improvement. And you might realize that, hey, there's no non-conformities or complaints, but the process just is quite inefficient. It takes us so long to execute this. We feel like there should be a way to shorten it. And then, of course, anyone that might have an idea for improvement, that could be a source for improvement potential. So these are not the only sources, but very commonly they come in these ways. And this is why I say what I said before about how if you're a manufacturer and you are, implementing and maintaining a quality system, you need to make sure that you don't do it in such a way that the individual people have their thinking taken away from them. You need them to be able to think and to be observant, because this is where their value will be to you, is to be able to say, hey, I see that nothing's gone wrong yet, but I can foresee one day XYZ is going to happen, and then our manufacturing line will have to stop. And then there'll be a really big problem. So we need to mitigate this in advance. And that is considered preventive action, right? So you are making an improvement on a process to prevent some catastrophe from happening later. And when we are looking at non-conformities and complaints, they will always, from a manufacturing standpoint, especially within medical device or even pharma, they need to trigger some kind of investigation to figure out what went wrong and why. And the why is the root cause analysis that gets done to get to the actual why. And then you got to react to that by taking corrective and or preventive actions that are appropriate to the root cause and to the actual original event, right? So let's say one of your customers are complaining that, hey, they've been receiving, your kit, that you made, and it's not working for some reason. So you seem to notice that it is always this one type of kit, this one product, and seems to also be always a certain lot, not any other lot or batch. So now you already have some preliminary information. So now you can start the investigation to see what was it about this batch that is causing your customer problems. So the quality event is that there's something wrong with this product and batch. So the first thing you need to do is do either a correction or a containment. And in this point or example, a containment is completely relevant. Your containment should be, okay, we will stop everybody from receiving any more of this batch, right? If you have any more of this batch in stock, they get segregated so that it's not possible for you to send out that batch of that product to any more customers. No need to have more people complaining. And then you may also need to contact any customers that have received that batch of that product and tell them, hey, we are recognizing there's some problems with this batch of this product. Our records show that you have purchased one or more of these kits. We're letting you know that there's a problem with it. So contact us and we will gladly exchange what you purchased for a replacement, right? So that could be part of containment. But then you still need to figure out, well, what actually went wrong? Like, why does that kit not work anymore? You need to do appropriate investigation. And the investigation and the root cause analysis, they kind of go hand in hand, because in the end, you need to find out what caused the problem that made the kit not work for your customers. And maybe in the end, you when you do your root cause analysis and you go through all possible things that could have gone wrong to give, let's say the symptom that your customer is complaining about is that I get invalid results. They're not valid. So maybe you've done your investigation and root cause analysis, and it turns out that there was a raw material that was received that was not functional. So let's say your supplier who normally sends you stuff always works, but this one lot of raw material that they sent you doesn't work. So that is your root cause. Now you have to figure out, what are you going to do to prevent that from happening again? That's your corrective and or preventive action. And you can determine what should be appropriate for that root cause as a corrective or preventive action, but only if you have identified the actual root cause or root causes. Because if you try to propose and implement a CAPA that doesn't really address the root cause, it will happen again because you haven't really fixed it, right? So this is very important consideration, that when you are making, products in the supply chain project that some of you are involved in and others of you are hoped to be involved in, that there will come a time when you have either internal failures that you identify, or that you send out product that whoever you send it out to, customers complaining about it. Now you need to figure out how you're going to address that. And this is this investigation, root cause analysis, and CAPA set of processes that will function in parallel with your manufacturing process. And I'll talk about this more, I think, probably tomorrow. But I think at this point, it is now your turn to be involved in the actual activity, which is you should break out into your assigned group. And then in your group, you should discuss amongst your group members the procedures that have been assigned to your group. So I think each group has 2 procedures. Is that correct, Yingsu?
That is correct.
Okay. And then once you've had time to analyze those procedures and discuss, then you should map the process that's described in those procedures out. So it's very clear what needs to be done step by step. And you can choose whichever format you feel is appropriate among those ones that I gave you examples of. There's not a right one and there's not a wrong one. It just depends on what you hope to do with that. So I think that some of these procedures maybe are not necessarily detailed enough, in which case the purpose should be to try to make the procedure more robust so that the likelihood of getting the expected result is much higher. And other procedures might have significant detail already, and it's not necessary to improve on the procedure itself, but maybe there's a need to make some improvements to the process. So you can kind of decide what angle you're going after, and that will influence the type of process map that you end up creating. And then once you've had a chance to do this, then you will be sharing your results with the rest of the participants so that people can see what you chose to do.
Yeah. So what I put on the chat was a link to the breakout room. You're going to have 6 breakout rooms, each with a facilitator. And you can see that there's a bunch of people on the slides already who the facilitators are. And what they are aiming to do is to make sure that everyone has equal share time and that you have a rich discussion. On the slide deck as well is that you're going to have breakout rooms, and the facilitators have a link to the shared folder. Each folder has 2 documents. Just work on the first document for now. We still have days 2 and 3 to work on the rest of the documents. Vivian, how much time should they have for this part? Do you think like 20 minutes, maybe?
Well, maybe what we can do is maybe give every group about 15 minutes to just look over the procedures, because some of them are seeing it for the first time.
Okay.
And then if there's a need to answer questions, because depending on what questions you might have, we can kind of come back together for a few minutes, and then you can go back to working together to process map. Does that make sense?
Well, just be aware that we have 35 minutes left here
Yep.
for the noon stop time. So 15 minutes to look through the documents, and then we come back to the main room and to answer any questions. And then you'll go back to your breakout to do the instructions that Vivian gave. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. There's no questions. I shall put you in your breakout rooms, and you will be, just click on to go to breakout rooms. Okay. So Linnea, which breakout room would you like to join a breakout room as well?
Sure, wherever you want me to go.
So let's put you with Joe.
Okay.
Breakout room 1.
Okay.
Vivian, that was great.
Thank you. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but I think there were significant questions and it was important to answer them.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you rush them through it and put them into the breakout rooms too soon, they don't really, you know, that they're confused too, because they don't, you gave them a lot of really valuable information that they'll be able to use and put it in.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that the cooking analogy helped, because I think that, because I felt myself having the same kinds of, you know, uncertainties as well. I'm not quite sure. I mean, how do you do it? And in the end, things are just a lot more common sense than I had thought. And I remember in the end thinking, well, what is this all? Was this all that was? And I was like, you know, worried for no real good reason. That's what it felt like in the end. But until you get to that realization, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Everything seems confusing.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, I'm trying to.
You having trouble getting into your breakout room?
No, I was trying to get the document. It was in the chat, and once I was in the breakout room, I couldn't get access to it, or I didn't see it. So I just.
Can you still see the chat? Sometimes you lose it when you.
Yeah, I put it in the chat again. So just go ahead and open it up now, and it should be on your tab when you go back.
Okay, I have it now. So how do I go back to my room? Do I need another invite?
Let's see. That's a good question. That is weird. So unassigned. It's not telling me anything. So which breakout room were you in? Let's see.
4.
Do you see anything on the bottom there that says breakout rooms? I don't see you. Oh, here you showed up now.
Oh, here, join breakout room.
Yes.
That will take me back. There we go.
So I think the cooking analogy was, I mean, that lit up the chat, and people were putting in all kinds of comments of how much they like that and how helpful that is. And I think it did help. And you know, you're right. You know, you think of these things, and even as you're showing these complex flow diagrams, you know, they're not that complex. I mean, you know, when you look at it, it just shows all these things that you know are going on at the same time, or you know, are different. However, it's happening, whatever the process is, whether you're cooking or you're making a product, you know, you're manufacturing something. You know, if you know the process, and it's just defining the process, we all do that all the time, but we just don't think about what we're doing. We don't think about it this way and realize that that's really what's just, you know, that's building the quality into it if we do it right.
Yeah, I think that I actually was rather surprised how well those recipes worked to show the inherent nature of quality in those recipes. So I didn't even really have to like hunt to find, you know, a specific recipe that had what I needed. I mean, I just pulled a couple that seemed good, and there were those things, you know. So, and you know, the concept of those critical control points, I don't think is, you know, so shockingly new that people would not realize them. I mean, I think people recognize that, oh yeah, I should probably check, you know, and then and they either do it or they don't do it, right? But it should be kind of obvious that, hey, this is a good place to check something. And you know, with cooking, everybody has their own cooking experience, so they can relate to past times where, oh, if only I had checked blah blah blah, I could have saved, you know, like if I'd only taste tested, I would have realized I already added salt and I didn't have to add like 3 times more salt.
And ruin it and then have to throw the batch out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that made it helpful for people to really put everything into perspective, because it really isn't extra.
No.
And you shouldn't think of it as extra.
You're doing it anyway. You're just not calling it anything.
Yes, you have to do it, because if you don't do it, it won't work.
Right, right. Otherwise, you just, I mean, you know, you just have these empty cabinets with nothing in them and bare cupboards, and you might have a couple of packages of something, but it's not going to make anything together. So, no,
so I was thinking that for the process mapping, they probably will need more time than today. So do we want to either give them more time tomorrow, or do we ask them to try and do something individually as homework that they can maybe come back together on?
What did you have in mind for tomorrow, given we got everything done today that was on the list?
So I was thinking that tomorrow we could go through a little bit about the quality tools, and that they could then start to apply some of them to the process that they've mapped, right? So they should have identified critical control points. Then they can decide which quality tools would be useful for those critical control points, like what would be the right QC activity, whether it's an inspection or some kind of test, and then which tools should be used. And then there should be some tools that you should be using kind of for every batch. So it's kind of like a monitoring type of tool. So there are discussions around how to integrate the tools once they have the process mapped out.
So, and how much time would you like to see them have for that?
Well, I don't want to spend a ton of time describing the tools, because they can look these up in the memory jogger, at least how to use the tool. But I think I need to spend some time identifying when a tool would be applicable and when would it not be, or if you have this situation, what would be the best tools to use. So I can talk a little bit about that. I shouldn't take very long. I'm guessing like half an hour or so. And then they should be able to spend the rest of the time, you know, doing whatever remaining process mapping they need, and then figuring out how they would integrate those tools into the process.
Okay, so oh, I'm sorry, keep going.
And then I was hoping that if they could finish all of this by tomorrow, that either at the end of the day, they get, you know, each group gets 10 minutes or so to present what they came up with as a process map, and then what they came up with as critical control points, and then how they're using the tools to help ensure the quality.
Mhm.
So as a person who's been to workshops, I actually don't like homework. I have too much to do. So homework is just an extra burden. And I think it's also helpful for people to talk to each other. And since they're not going to have a lot of time today, I think it would be helpful for them to go over maybe just one of the documents and put in the annotations like how you have done, I think, with the recipes, and they can talk to each other with that. And then they can do a share out. And then you can go over your quality tools, and then go back to the documents with the quality tools in mind then, and then do another share out. So we're not over padding too much stuff, because I think it's nice to leave a lot of time for them to do a lot more engagement with each other, and to make sure that they are understanding the concepts that you presented today.
Okay. Yeah, I think the time is best spent for them to, roll up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty with regard to applying everything we talked about. And, the process mapping, I think people should recognize that if they actually map out the process, then they should just include that map with every procedure, because I personally would rather work off of a flow chart than a written document, because I'm a visual person. I can immediately see what I need to do. And then some people say, yeah, but you can't replace the procedure with the flow chart, because sometimes you need to explain things that you can't squeeze into a box on the flow chart. Sure, I agree with that. But that's not to say that you should just discard all written procedures and only use flow charts. But if you use the flow chart as kind of the main structure of communicating the process, then the written stuff could be the explanations and the other things that you need to help assure that you're on the right track. And I think with a flow chart, it's usually less likely you misinterpret it than written information. At least that's my view, but there may be cases where a flow chart isn't clear enough, in which case you obviously then need to improve on that flow chart.
That makes sense. So then, and then on Thursday, what will they be doing, or what are your plans for Thursday?
So Thursday we can either do another procedure, and maybe they can do it more quickly because they've gone through it once before. Or if you think there's something else that we should focus on, I didn't really plan it out because I wasn't sure what people would need. I kind of wanted to leave it a bit loose so that if people are saying, hey, I'm still not sure about this, or I would like to see more of blah, then we could use Thursday for that as well. And maybe Thursday, maybe we should put all the presentations on Thursday so that they have more time tomorrow to do group work.
Yeah, I also like the idea of giving them an opportunity to do another one on Thursday to get that practice, because what I find from going to workshops is sometimes if you get new information, constantly through the workshop, which is great, and you don't get to assimilate it, it gets lost. And so if they do, that would just reinforce what they're learning. And if there might be a lot more that they're not, that they're not getting because they're just the time. But we could do another workshop down the road instead of, give them the opportunity to take this chunk and actually be able to implement it and put it into their classes. And I think it'd be a great idea to even have their students help them, create these process maps, for what they're doing, because I think that would help the students learn this.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think that having them do another document would sort of help solidify it a little bit more. We have one more minute, so should I
Yeah, you can put blast it to them.
Okay, I think we get a minute to close anyway, so.
Yeah. So yeah, and then if they finish it and it finishes up early and there's extra time and there's, other things you want to talk about, that's great.
Yep. Or if they have more questions, I can certainly address that.
Right, exactly. So I think it's great. I like that you built in that flexibility.
Okay, they have 50-ish seconds.
30 seconds it says on mine, but then it stopped.
30 seconds.
It's not counting down, so. Okay, so they're just going to come back for questions, then we'll send them back to the breakout rooms to do some work.
Yeah, I hope that I can recreate the breakout rooms.
Oh, does it go away?
I don't know. I hope not. I think there's a recreate button. So
we'll find out.
Yep.
Yeah, because hi, Wendy.
Hi there. I am a rate limiting step in some fashion because I wasn't clever about using my own protocol to for the group. And I think it was because the protocol was not extremely well defined, because that was the whole point of the teams working on it. And maybe cryo cups are not used anymore, but we used them. And so we had more questions than answers.
Okay, so I guess you can ask them if anyone has questions. Maybe I'll start with the breakout rooms first. If there's breakout rooms, breakout room 1, if there's any questions for Vivian about your document.
So did you want us to make a map for the entire thing or just portions of the protocol?
I think ideally the whole thing, if you can. So obviously you will have more time tomorrow to do this. So don't feel like you have to have it all done today.
Okay.
This was just to be able to answer any initial questions that might be blocking you from figuring out what you need to do. So this is why we gathered everybody back.
And is there a particular program that you typically would draw these maps on, like PowerPoint or something else? Lucidchart?
You can use Lucidchart. I know some people use Visio, but of course that costs money. I mean, it could be hand drawn for all you need to do. It doesn't, nothing fantastical. Okay. But PowerPoint would work. You could probably do some of it in Word as well. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Just the idea is to map out the process so that it's very clear, and then later on you're going to then decide where those critical control points ought to be.
All right, great, thank you.
Will we be using the same document tomorrow? Am I understanding?
Yes.
Yeah. If you want a different document, Wendy, stay after. I'll talk to you.
No, we're fine. It was not the document. We had some questions about the fact that we didn't have written instructions, that they were verbal and people couldn't remember the different formats. And I'm actually speaking for the team, which is a mistake. I should let them.
For my team too.
I see. Okay.
Vivian, are you going to let us share your slide deck?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there were some glitches in it. I just want to clean those up, and then I can just send out the link, or have Ying-Su send the link out to the presentation.
Okay, Chandra, do you have any questions?
All the questions. We are loaded with that.
Okay.
Wendy nailed it, and thank you, Wendy. I want to actually speak on behalf of everybody. Number one, we are a great team. We were all lost completely. But we all came together and tried attempting the start and how it should flow. I figured out some smart art to include in there, but Kitty was wonderful in drawing the boxes. I personally want to know if there should be more than one flow chart for each critical area, or leaving at that critical point, or there should be one and then we come back to it and decide what are the critical points.
Either way, I mean, if it helps you to put them in initially, then do that. Or if you just want to get through getting the process described first, then do that and then go back and decide where would be appropriate critical control points. It's up to you.
Vivian, maybe it's helpful if you talk about what you plan to do tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So my hope was that you would, each group would take one procedure and then map out the process described in that procedure. I recognize for some of those processes, you might have to fill in some gaps because maybe there's not enough detail in the procedure, but do your best to map out something that should work for that process. Then you would need to identify where the critical control point should be for that process. And then tomorrow I'll discuss how you would use the different quality tools. So you have the memory jogger that explains individual ones and how each one actually works, but you don't have the background information on you know, if you have this situation, what is the best tool to use in that case? Or if you want to do this or that, should you use this tool, or is it better to use this other tool, or should you use both? So I can give you some guidelines tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you how each tool needs to be set up that you can use the memory jogger for, but I'll tell you more about some application notes on you know, when are they relevant or when are they not relevant, and then you can hopefully then incorporate within your process chart these activities that would require you to use these tools, and then after that you could share with everyone else what your group came up with. And then I think we should have time Thursday to do another procedure, I think. And that'll help you, you know, reinforce what you're learning about today and tomorrow.
You know, I'm going to ask a question that may be really silly, but can our folk in our number 6 room get that process that we were working on like homework? I mean, it seems to me that we didn't get enough of a start. We had all kinds of ideas, but we didn't produce anything. And my feeling is that we have an aggravated desire to have something to show tomorrow.
I think you'll get more time tomorrow to work on that. So if you are passionate enough to think about this evening or afternoon and do some work on it, I won't you know, say that that's not a good thing for you to do individually. Then you can share whatever you did with the rest of your group tomorrow. But you will get time tomorrow to map out, you know, the process as much as possible. And then what I'll do is probably in the middle of tomorrow's time, I'll talk a little bit about the quality tools and give you some guidance. And then you can go back to finishing that up with integrating the quality tools as well as the critical control points, so that you have something by the end of the day that you could share with the others. So if you want homework, you can certainly self-assign yourself homework, but I don't want to force it in case some of you have other obligations that you have today.
Right.
Vivian, our group was actually really interested in doing kind of the spaghetti process. And because, again, our group, we were going over making media, and we felt that was really, you know, weighing stuff out on a scale, putting stuff in the autoclave, pouring plates out in a laminar flow hood. We're very kind of area oriented. And so we kind of wanted to do it that, you know, is it okay if we do the spaghetti mapping, I guess?
Yes, as long as you have the sufficient detail to show each step. So
do that.
As long as that is somehow there, because you're going to need to add the critical control points to whatever you map. And then depending on the granularity of your spaghetti map, I guess, it may work out. So I'll let you guys decide.
I have a couple of questions.
Jan, yes.
From group 4. I guess one of the things we're wondering is how much we can change what's shown in the assignment. So for instance, if it says calculate the production cost for a liter of buffer A, but students are actually using 200 mils, can we change that and have students calculate the production costs for 200 mils instead of a liter? Can we, you know, the assignments are numbered, you know, in an order. Can we switch the order of that when we make the process map? You know, like have them calculate production costs before they actually make the buffer?
I see. If the order doesn't impact the execution, then yes, I think you can certainly change up that order.
Sorry, and can we add something that we feel was left out? Like if the assignment has the students or workers, whoever, calculate the production cost for one of the buffers, but they're actually making 2 buffers, can we add in a step where they calculate the production cost for the second buffer?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think for each group, there should be someone in that group who owns that document. So I think whatever you end up with tomorrow should be helpful for that person to.
Oh, okay,
so that,
I didn't realize that. So that's good to know. Thank you.
So you might want to talk to whoever is the owner.
Oh, we're the only group with no owners.
Oh,
yeah.
So I guess we just decide as long as we come to consensus, I guess we're good.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And Manny, are you out here? Do you have any questions? Yeah. Yes,
no, it's fine.
Okay. Okay. So Vivian, should we send them back? 10 minutes.
Yes. Or if there are any, I mean, I don't know if you want to, do you want to spend the last 10 minutes doing more work, or do you have other questions you want answered? It's up to you.
I have a question. Do we all have separate documents or same documents?
Separate.
They're different, but they're I think each document is being worked on by 2 groups, or can be worked on by 2 groups, because each group was assigned 2 documents.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Shall we send you back to your breakout?
Yes,
Okay,
so we can
I see you.
strategize.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm opening rooms.
I think I might need to be sent back to the breakout because I had to like re-enter the meeting because it didn't kick me back when I got kicked out of the previous breakout room.
Okay. Do you remember what breakout?
I'm in number 1.
I'm in number 1 too. There we are. Send me back to 1.
Assign to 1. So you're not showing up here, Linnea. Did you get a? The only 3 that are unassigned here are Terry, Vivian, and I.
Yeah, and Lakshmi, you're in 4, it looks like.
Oh, join breakout room. Never
Yeah.
mind.
I should see something. So Lakshmi, yeah.
Unless you want me to stay out and talk about other stuff, Terry.
No, we can, did you get the invitation I sent you?
I did, but if you'd rather I do that, to be honest, I'm kind of used to the fact that I don't do any of these things anymore and I just administrate. No, I mean, I can stay out and talk to you.
Oh,
I got the idea what we're doing and everything, so.
Yeah, no, you're welcome to hang out here, but I'd rather talk to you on Friday and be able to, it'd probably take more than just a couple minutes.
No, you guys, you're gonna write a grant, right?
Yeah. Yep. So this.
I don't mind hanging out because then I get to talk to Vivian, who I haven't seen in a long time.
I know, it felt like I fell off the face of the earth, didn't it?
You did. Yeah, let me hang out here because I get to talk to Vivian then.
Yeah, stick around.
Yeah.
So you'll be happy to note that in my current role, I guess, you know, once an educator, always an educator, because I was given the responsibility of globally managing the training program for our division. So now I get to call the shots on what was quite a crappy training program that we are overhauling, and people are liking the direction it's going. So,
well, I'm not surprised.
So that's sucking up a lot of my time.
Yeah. You know, I love the, I still keep going back to the cooking analogy, and I love that. And I teach plant-based cooking classes. So I think it would be really fun to work this in.
Well, and then you can see that I've taken the QA QC course since I'm the one who's teaching it all the time. And I turned it around on the students a bit, because besides running the program like a company, each course like a company to some degree, I had to get them to start thinking about themselves as the product of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they actually are our product.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I realized then I could get their buy-in.
Yeah.
To doing stuff, and then I'm not just trying to torture them.
But you know, I was saying to Vivian earlier on the last breakout session that, you know, I think for everybody we do this without realizing we're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so it's so big. I mean, nothing would work in life if we didn't build some, you know, quality checkpoints in and have some sort of process. Or when we don't have a process, things just go awry, you know, and we know that. So, but we just don't call it anything. We just do it, but we don't call it anything.
And we don't necessarily figure out the critical points, like especially in cooking. Mm-hmm. I do cook a lot of things by the seat of my pants, but I'm really not doing that. It's just that I've done it long enough that I've already done a lot of these steps in my head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, you know, how your grandmother used to make bread or something. It's like she would tell you she weighs nothing out, but actually she is, but she's using her senses mm-hmm. to do the amount and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, she knows it. She knows what it looks like. She knows what looks right. Or by tasting it, you know, you have enough of these spices or seasonings in it. And, mm-hmm. you know to start with a smaller amount and build it up if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she knows how the bread should feel when she's working with it and, you know, everything. So.
But I wonder about, you know, with students, even like before, I mean, you could do it with either with the lab, like you could have them. I know Wendy does a lot in her incubator where she has students, if there's not a process already made up, and you might do this too, Linnea, if there's not already a process made up for something, then the students do that and work on it. or even start with something else that's just, I don't know, garbage, where they have to end up making something out of it, and have them kind of fit as they figure it out. They're going to start figuring out what the steps are and start to figure out kind of, you know, again, doing all of these different checkpoints, the process and the checkpoints, without, you know, really knowing that's what they're doing. Because you know, it's just this, I don't know, Vivian, this is really opening my brain on this whole thing, because it just makes you realize that it is innate. You have to do this in order for anything to work, and you don't always do it perfect. And then you have process improvement.
But
Yeah,
I think, go ahead.
I think that, you know, with people in our circle, you know, when they hear, oh, you got to teach quality and make sure your students know about it, it's like, well, how do I do that? Because if you haven't worked in industry, you have no reference point. And I was starting to see, just based on how people were talking about quality, that they were mostly thinking it's something extra they have to do. But it's not. It's there already. You just have to see that it's there, or show that it's there. And I think that's when I realized, hey, I need some way to demonstrate that the inherent nature of it. And the cooking analogy I thought was the best way, because it does parallel lab work, right? Cooking. And everyone can relate to it. So if someone shows you, hey, look, I don't have to create any extra stuff for quality. It's already here. And here are where all the places I am seeing quality. Then it should become more apparent that, okay, then I'm not doing anything extra. I just have to point out what it is as we encounter it.
So excuse me, it's 12 o'clock. Should I bring everyone back? Because this workshop does end at 12. Yeah.
Sure. Just a quick
Okay,
wrap up.
so just let them know.
But you could even do it for a video game, which is probably something that at least my grandchildren would identify more with than cooking. Because to be honest, they do that. The PDCA when they play video games, because they do it over and over again.
Yeah.
And they end up testing how they get past a barrier or something in a video game. So they do that over and over again. They just don't think of it that way.
And I think anyone who's done basic research has done PDCA over and over again.
Oh, yeah. But if I wanted to talk to my grandkids about it, it'd probably be Minecraft. That actually you do PDCA over and over again in Minecraft.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Vivian, Yingsu, and Terry, for this very informative morning for us. And I'll see you tomorrow then.
Thank you all. Thank you, Vivian. Very, very nice seeing you after years, and appreciate sharing all the wealth of knowledge today. Thank you, Linnea. Thank you, Terry and Yingsu. Really appreciate all the efforts you have put in this. So looking forward to it tomorrow.
Vivian, we miss you.
Yes, we do.
I know. I miss you guys too. I just wished my life wasn't so crazy busy, because I used to be so active with this circle of people. And I'm sure you all probably thought I, fell off the face of the earth and I'm never to be seen again.
Oh no,
but
we knew exactly
I'm
what you were doing.
Yeah, I feel like, no, you became a billionaire. You retired to an island. Vivian, at some point, I will have to share with everybody how I figured out how to do having students make products that actually compete commercially and get away with it on a grant.
Please
Because remember how that was a big sticky point for NSF?
Yes, but it can't be that sticky, because there's that college in Santa Rosa that has a wine making program. They make wine and they sell it.
Oh yeah.
So
Vivian, I want
And
to
Napa,
introduce
Napa
myself.
Valley College.
So I just want to introduce myself because when I was, I received the NSF grant for the making biomanufacturing supply chain for protein production. And I actually came across your student manufactured NSF project at that time. So I would probably email you to ask more sort of like your wisdom in terms of how to run the facility, how to, the process of money flowing in and out and all that. So
Sure, glad to help.
thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, I put stuff now through the foundation, not through my own revenue account, but that's a long story.
Yeah,
that
we
we
also
can
have the
share
foundation.
some data.
Yeah, we
so
have
that,
foundation to Linnea. So
yeah. So NSF doesn't get mad at me. I just, hey, well, I worked there. I figured out how to get around NSF. Of course.
So I
Hopefully
think
they're still not recording that, or if they are recording,